The text message from a dead friend? It was 3 a.m., and the rain was pouring down in sheets outside. I was awoken from my sleep by the sound of my phone vibrating on my nightstand. I sat up in bed and fumbled for my phone. On the screen, I saw the name of the person who was texting me. It was my friend Liam. Liam had died 2 years ago. I stared at the message. Was this some kind of joke? I didn't think so. I knew when he'd died because I'd been there at the hospital with his parents. He'd lost his battle to cancer after being sick for months. I rubbed my eyes and looked at the message again. Was I really getting a text message from my dead friend? What should I do? I thought about ignoring it, but then I thought maybe it was important. Maybe he needed my help, or maybe he just wanted to talk to me. Either way, I owed it to him to at least respond. I typed back, "What's up?" and hit send. Then I went back to bed and tried to go back to sleep, but my mind was racing. Why was I getting a text message from my dead friend, and what did he want? I tossed and turned in bed for hours, but sleep wouldn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Liam's face. I eventually got out of bed and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. As I drank the water, I looked at my phone, hoping for a response from Liam, but there was nothing. I went back to my room and got on my couch. That's when I heard it again, the sound of my phone vibrating. This time it was a FaceTime call from Liam. I hesitated before picking up the call. What if it was some kind of prank? Who else would be behind it? But I knew that I wouldn't find out unless I picked up. I brought the phone up to my face, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. There on the other side of the screen was Liam. But how? How could this be possible? I stuttered, trying to speak, but no words came out. All I could do was stare at Liam in disbelief. He looked at me and smiled. "Hey Mike," he said. His voice sounded weak and distant. "What are you doing?" I finally managed to say. "I don't know," Liam replied. "I just needed someone to talk to." I felt a lump in my throat. It was like talking to him in real life, except there was a slight delay between what he said and when I heard it. It was as if we were talking through a walkie-talkie. At first I thought I was crazy. I mean, how could I be talking to my dead friend? But then I realized that this was really him. I could tell by the way he looked at me, the way he smiled, the way he spoke. It was all Liam. We talked for hours, and I learned that he wasn't really dead. Not completely, anyway. He explained that he was stuck in limbo, unable to move on because he had unfinished business. He told me that he needed my help to fix things with his parents, before he could finally rest in peace. I didn't hesitate for a moment. I loved Liam more than anything, and I would do anything to help him. I promised him that I would make things right with his parents. Then he disappeared from the screen. Just like that, he was gone. I stayed on the call for a few minutes longer, but he never came back. I ended the call and looked at my phone in disbelief. Could this really be happening? I decided not to tell anyone, thinking they wouldn't believe me. Instead, I went to see Liam's parents. I knocked on their door and introduced myself. They were shocked to see me and invited me inside. They were still grieving over the loss of their son, and I could see that they blamed themselves for his death. I sat down with them and told them how much Liam loved them. I told them how much he missed them and how he wanted them to be happy. I also told them that he wanted them to forgive each other. After I left, I knew that things would never be the same again. I kept in touch with Liam's parents, and they slowly began to heal. I could see that they appreciated me helping them during their time of need. But as the weeks went by, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. I kept having nightmares about Liam, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something bad was going to happen. One night I woke up in the middle of the night and decided to get a glass of water. As I walked into the kitchen, I saw my phone glowing in the dark. I picked it up and saw that I had a new message. It was from Liam. "Help me," the message read. I felt a chill down my spine. I didn't reply, but I couldn't help but worry about him. The next day, I decided to visit Liam's grave. I hadn't been in months, and I wanted to see how it was holding up. As I approached the grave, I saw that it was covered in flowers, but as I got closer, I realized that the flowers were wilting, and the grave was overgrown with weeds. I couldn't believe that his parents would let this happen to his final resting place. I was so angry that I started yelling at them. I told them that they were horrible people, and that they didn't deserve Liam. They came out of the house and tried to apologize, but I wouldn't let them. I told them that they had hurt Liam, and that I would never forgive them. They begged me to listen to them, but I just kept yelling. It was then that I noticed something strange. His grave was empty. I looked around frantically, but I couldn't see Liam anywhere. I started to panic, not knowing where he could be. I ran back to the house and called his parents. They answered the phone and I demanded to know where Liam was. They sounded just as panicked as I felt and said that they didn't know. They had no idea where he could be. I knew then that something was very wrong. I called the police and reported him missing. I told them everything that had happened, but they didn't seem to believe me. They thought that I was crazy and that I had made the whole thing up, but I knew that I wasn't. I knew that something bad had happened to Liam. The police searched for him, but they couldn't find any trace of him. It was as if he had vanished into thin air. I was devastated. I felt like it was my fault that he had disappeared. If only I had fixed things with his parents sooner, maybe he wouldn't have run away. I couldn't forgive myself. Months went by, but there was still no sign of Liam. I moved on with my life, but I never forgot about Liam. I often wondered if he was out there somewhere, wondering if he was okay. Then one day, I got a call from the police. They told me that they had found a body, and that they were bringing him back to the station for me to identify. I felt my heart sink. I knew in my gut that it was Liam. When I got to the station, the detective took me into a room and showed me the body. It was Liam. He was lying on a table covered in a sheet. I pulled the sheet off and looked at him. His face was pale and his eyes were closed, but then he opened his eyes and looked at me. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry." He looked at me with a sad smile on his face, and then he disappeared. I was left alone in the room with a body that wasn't even there. I knew then that Liam had finally found peace. He was finally free from the limbo that had been holding him back. I was happy for him, but I was also sad. I would miss him, but I knew that he was in a better place now. I went to his funeral and said goodbye to him one last time. As I stood at his grave, I felt a sense of closure. I knew that he was at peace now, and that was all that mattered. I've moved on with my life, but I'll never forget Liam. He taught me that even in death, there is hope for peace. Now, check out the phone call, or watch The Woman Who Came Back from the Dead for another similar video. They say nothing is impossible for the one who believes. Do you believe in miracles? Well, if not, you're about to see one. Welcome to my channel. And today we will look at the tomb that glows at midnight. So make sure to watch until the end. Also, please subscribe to our channel and like this video so that we can keep bringing you such amazing content. This place is not a secret. It is right there on the edge of the forest. But despite the fact that people pass by every day, no one pays any attention to it. The thing is, they simply do not know that this place has such a strange and inexplicable property. This story happened in 1986 in the Spanish town of Oviedo. One local resident came home late from work and on his way was passing by the cemetery where he had buried his wife 2 years earlier. Suddenly, the man noticed an unusual glow coming from his wife's grave. At first he thought it was his imagination playing tricks on him. You know, grief can play nasty jokes sometimes. But then the glow started to get brighter and brighter. The man tried to make out what was happening. He even peered into the grave, but he couldn't see anything. He couldn't believe his eyes. This could not be happening. His wife had died and was buried here. There was no way she could be glowing from inside the grave. However, the stranger the phenomenon became, the more people started to notice it. Soon, the townspeople began to call the police, journalists, and even the church, but no one could explain what was happening. So let's take a moment to think about this. What exactly did they see? Could it really be that a dead person was emitting light? Was it some kind of miracle or perhaps something else? When we hear about someone rising from the dead, we immediately think of Jesus Christ. For Christians, this would be considered a resurrection, which is often depicted as a luminous event. In this case, however, the woman didn't rise from the dead because she wasn't dead to begin with. Well, maybe she just fell into a deep sleep. After all, we don't know for sure what happens after death. But if that were true, why wouldn't she just wake up? Why wait until midnight? There are many religions in the world, and each of them teaches its followers different things. Some believe that death is nothing more than a transition to another plane of existence. Others believe that death is eternal, and that when a person dies, their soul leaves their body and goes to heaven or hell. And still, others believe that death is just a part of life, and that one day we will all be resurrected. But whatever people may believe, one thing is for sure. No one can explain what happened in that tomb. Perhaps it was some kind of radioactive glow. After all, Spain is located on the Iberian Peninsula, which is known for its uranium deposits. Maybe the woman was exposed to some kind of radiation that made her body glow. Or maybe it was a miracle. Who knows? It is said that if you have faith, then you can move mountains. Well, maybe this woman moved a mountain of dirt that covered her grave. She probably heard that people were talking about her and decided to surprise them. But why did she wait until midnight? Was she shy? Maybe she didn't want anyone to see her grave during the day because it would be too bright and attract too much attention. But at night everything is darker, so the glow would be less noticeable. Have you ever seen anything like this? Let us know in the comments below. In general, people in this town were rather skeptical about the woman's glow. They said that this was nothing more than a publicity stunt. Moreover, according to eyewitnesses, the woman's grave began to glow long before her death. In other words, the glow appeared when the woman was still alive and well. Of course, this could be explained by the fact that the woman was radioactive and her body emitted radiation. But this version is not entirely correct because doctors examined her and found no abnormalities. The woman was absolutely healthy. Her body did not emit any kind of radiation. Most likely, the glow came from the grave itself. But how could this be possible? The thing is, the glow was not constant. It appeared only at midnight and lasted for several minutes. Then everything went back to normal and the grave began to glow again, only the next day at midnight. This happened every night. The grave glowed at midnight and then fell silent until the next day. At first, the townspeople thought it was some kind of joke. Someone was messing around and putting luminous paint on the grave, but soon they realized that this was not the case. No one dared to approach the grave at night and check it out. And moreover, no one knew what the paint looked like. If it really was paint, it was either luminescent or phosphorescent. But the most interesting part was yet to come. One night, a group of young people decided to find out what was going on. After all, they had heard stories about the glowing corpse, but no one had ever seen it for themselves. They wanted to be the first, and so one night they went to the cemetery. The guys brought a shovel and a bucket with them, as well as a flashlight and some tools. They carefully dug up the grave, but they found nothing. All they found was a wooden cross and a coffin. But the coffin was empty. The corpse was nowhere to be found. You probably think that the corpse was stolen, but that's not the case. A few days later, the coffin was examined by forensic experts. It turned out that the coffin was indeed empty. The corpse had been missing for a long time, although no one knew about it. How could this be? The corpse simply vanished into thin air. Where did it go? Who knows? And what about the glow? Perhaps it was just the corpse wanting to tell its loved ones that it was fine, and that they shouldn't worry about it. Maybe it was the corpse's way of saying goodbye. After all, it had already moved on to another world and didn't need a grave anymore. But why did it wait until midnight? Maybe it was scared. Who knows? What if the glow was just a farewell sign and the corpse's way of letting its loved ones know that it was okay? Well, that's one way to look at it. But what if the glow was a warning? What if the corpse was trying to tell its loved ones that they should have buried it there? Well, that's just silly. People bury their dead relatives all the time, and no one has any problems. Unless, of course, the person is cursed. Some people believe that certain individuals are cursed, and that if you bury them in the ground, they will come back and haunt you. Perhaps that's what happened in this case. The curse caused the corpse to glow. But why did it take 2 years for the curse to activate? Perhaps the curse was dormant for 2 years, and only then did it decide to reveal itself. If that's true, then we can only hope that the curse will not affect those who come to the cemetery at night. After all, we don't know what it's capable of. Perhaps it will curse those who disturb its peace. And what if they become infected with the curse and start glowing too? Well, that's unlikely. But what if the glow was the corpse's way of communicating with its loved ones? Imagine you're sitting at home alone, and suddenly you see a strange glow outside your window. You go outside to take a look, and what do you see? Your dead loved one is standing in front of you and waving at you. Would you be scared, or would you be happy to see them again? What would you do? In any case, if this happened, you would definitely remember it for the rest of your life. This would be the most important day in your life. The day when the dead return to you. But this never happens. The dead never come back. Or do they? Well, we'll leave the answer to this question up to you. But we suggest you watch another video that we have prepared for you. Have you ever seen a ghost? Well, here's your chance to see one in this video. The Highway Phantom is a scary unsolved mystery that has never been explained, and it may just be the most terrifying ghost story that you've ever heard. It was September 23, 1939, and a full moon hung heavy in the dark sky above Harvester Road, Missouri. This road was a major route for transport trucks, but it was also popular with locals who wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city. But on this night, no one should have been on the road. There was a dense fog, visibility was less than 100 feet, and there had been a trucker strike going on for weeks. Suddenly, through the fog, a light appeared in the distance. It grew steadily brighter until it illuminated the road like daytime. Then, just as quickly, it disappeared. People who were hiding from the war and the strike came out of their homes to see what was going on, but when they got outside, the only thing they saw was fog. An hour passed. Then too, people were beginning to go back inside when suddenly the light appeared again, growing brighter and brighter until it was like a spotlight. They all ran outside again and saw a huge shape emerge from the fog. At first, they thought it was a transport truck, except that the shape was moving way too fast. It was flying down the road at reckless speed, swerving between the lines. But as the strange vehicle approached, they could see it was no truck. It was a horse. Not just any horse, though. It was a skeletal horse, a ghostly white horse, its ribs showing through its emaciated skin, dragging itself down the highway like it was in a horror movie. People stood frozen with fear as the ghastly horse dragged itself closer and closer. Then, as suddenly as it had appeared, the horse vanished into the fog. No one moved for a long time after it disappeared. Then one brave soul ventured onto the road to look for tracks or some other sign of what they had just seen. But there was nothing. The only evidence that the ghostly horse had even been there was the tire tracks left by the people who had come out to watch it. And that wasn't the only time people saw the phantom hearse. In fact, it became a regular occurrence. Every night around midnight, people would see the ghostly white horse dragging an old wooden hearse down the highway. Sometimes it moved so fast that the trees along the road seemed to blur. Other times it seemed to move in slow motion, allowing the terrified witnesses to get a better look at the horrifying scene. In the hearse, they could make out the shape of a man sitting behind the wheel. He looked like he was wearing a top hat and a long black coat. But when the witnesses got close enough to see his face, they could never get a good look at him. His face was obscured by a mist that seemed to emanate from his body. One witness described what he saw. I could unsee his face, because there was this mist rising up from him and floating about him. I don't want to sound like a crazy person, but that's the best way I can describe it. But the sightings weren't limited to just the people who lived near. Harvester Road. Truck drivers reported seeing the phantom horse on the highway as well. Some said they saw it coming toward them, and then it seemed to float right through their cabs, as if they were not even there. Others saw it pass them by so close that they could hear the sound of the horse's hooves on the metal road. It didn't seem to matter where you were on the highway. The phantom horse would appear, and it always seemed to be carrying that same mysterious passenger, in the top hat and the long black coat. And it wasn't just the phantom horse. Some people saw other strange things as well, like glowing orbs floating through the air or spectral figures walking along the side of the road. One witness even saw a whole parade of ghosts, including a man on a horse, a woman in a Victorian nightgown, and a group of children holding hands. But no matter what anyone saw, they were all too afraid to stick around and find out. After all, who would be crazy enough to venture onto a deserted highway in the middle of the night during a truckers' strike and a war? Especially when a deadly virus was sweeping the country. The sightings continued for weeks, and then just as suddenly as it began, it ended. Then in 1941, the phantom horse returned. It was March when a local police officer was driving home from a night shift. He was driving down Harvester Road when he saw the glowing light of the headlights of an approaching vehicle. As the car came closer, he could see that it was an old wooden hearse being driven by a skeleton of a man wearing a top hat. The officer tried to drive toward the center of the road to get out of the way, but as he did, the hearse turned and floated right through his car. The officer told investigators that he felt a cold spot where the hearse had touched his vehicle, but otherwise he was unharmed. This time, the sightings lasted longer, continuing into April, and this time, the witnesses included a deputy sheriff and several other police officers. But no one was hurt, and no one was willing to risk their safety just to get a closer look. So no one knows for sure if the phantom horse actually existed. There were rumors that someone was trying to drum up business for their funeral home by staging these elaborate pranks, but no one ever came forward with any proof. There were also rumors that the sightings were connected to an old burial ground that had been dug up during the construction of the highway, but there was never any evidence to support this theory. Then the sightings abruptly stopped. For the next 32 years, the only traffic on Harvester Road was the occasional truck driver who was brave enough to venture out in the fog, or the curious locals who wanted to see if they could witness the paranormal. But in 1973, the phantom horse returned again. This time, the witnesses included a local mortician and several members of the National Police Association, but no one was harmed. After each appearance, the ghostly horse would vanish into the thick fog, leaving behind only the smell of honeysuckle and the sound of crickets. Even more strange, none of the witnesses could remember what the horse looked like or anything else about the incident the next day. So what was the deal with the phantom hearse? Was it a hoax or something more sinister? Well, there are a few theories out there. Some believe that the phantom hearse is the ghost of a funeral procession that was lost in the fog. Others believe that it's the ghost of a murderer who is searching for his next victim. And still, others believe that it's simply a warning to stay off the road at night. Whatever the truth may be, one thing is for sure. The phantom hearse is a terrifying reminder that sometimes the things we fear the most are the ones we can't see. Now, If you think this case is creepy, wait until you hear the story of the vanishing hitchhiker. This spine-chilling tale will leave you questioning everything you know about reality and death itself. So click the link on screen now to keep watching. Just remember, if you hear a knock on your door and no one's there, don't answer.